Captain Vex Corvani leaned back in his command chair aboard the Shadowhawk, watching the tactical display with predatory satisfaction. 3 months of hunting had finally paid off. The target vessel hung motionless in space before them, a pathetic excuse for a ship that barely registered on their sensors. "Thermal signatures are minimal, Captain," reported his tactical officer, a scarred Zelthonian named Drex. "Hull composition appears to be standard durasteel plating, maybe 30 years old. No weapons signatures detected." Vex's mandibles clicked in amusement. The Corvani Syndicate hadn't become the most feared pirate organization in 3-star systems by overlooking easy targets, but this was almost insulting. The vessel before them looked like a decommissioned cargo hauler, the kind of ship desperate merchants used when they couldn't afford anything better. "Life signs?" Vex asked, though he already knew the answer would disappoint him. Rich targets traveled in style, with full crews and expensive life support systems. "Single humanoid aboard, Captain. Appears to be human, based on the biosignature." "A human." Vex's interest perked up slightly. Humans had developed a reputation throughout the galaxy as being unpredictably resourceful, though this one seemed to have made some poor life choices if they were piloting such a wreck through Syndicate space. "Any response to our hails?" "Negative, sir. They've gone completely dark since we started our approach." Vex studied the vessel more carefully. The Drifting Dream, according to their scanner's registry lookup, currently registered to one Marcus Chen. The registration was legitimate, filed through the Terran Colonial Administration 6 months ago. Background checks showed Chen as a former cargo pilot with a clean record, no outstanding warrants, no known criminal associations. "Scans show minimal cargo," Drex continued. "Maybe 5 tons of mixed goods in the hold. Nothing exotic or valuable showing up on passive sensors." This was becoming less interesting by the moment. Vex had hoped for at least a decent score to justify the fuel expenditure, but it looked like they'd caught a nobody hauling nobody cargo to nowhere important. Still, protocol was protocol, and the Syndicate maintained its reputation through consistent application of fear. "Boarding pods ready?" Vex asked. "Standing by, Captain." "Send them over." "Standard intimidation protocol. Strip whatever's valuable and leave them with enough life support to reach the nearest station." As the boarding pods launched toward the Drifting Dream, Vex settled back to watch. This would be routine work, hardly worth his direct attention. His crew could handle one frightened human cargo pilot. The first surprise came when the boarding pods reached the target vessel. "Sir," came the voice of Sergeant Crix over the comm, the airlock cycled automatically. "No resistance at all. It's like they're inviting us aboard." Vex frowned. Most civilians either tried to run or barricaded themselves in their ships when pirates approached. Simply opening the doors suggested either supreme confidence or complete terror. Given the state of the ship, he was betting on the latter. "Proceed with caution," he ordered. "Could be a trap." But, as his boarding team reported their progress through the ship, it became clear this was no trap. The vessel was exactly what it appeared to be, a worn-out cargo hauler with minimal defensive systems and a single, apparently unarmed occupant. "We've secured the bridge, Captain," Crix reported. "Human male, approximately 40 standard years, no weapons detected. He's cooperative." "Cooperative how?" "He says he's been expecting us." Now that was interesting. Vex leaned forward in his chair, mandibles clicking rapidly as they did when he was thinking hard. Civilians didn't expect pirate attacks unless they had some reason to. "Put him on the comm," Vex ordered. A moment later, a human voice came through the speakers, surprisingly calm for someone whose ship had just been boarded by armed pirates. "Captain Corvani, I presume?" "I'm Marcus Chen, owner and operator of this vessel. I believe we have some business to discuss." Vex's 4 eyes narrowed. It was unusual for a victim to know his name, and even more unusual for them to suggest business rather than beg for mercy. "The only business we have, human, is determining how much of your cargo and equipment is worth taking. My scans suggest the answer is very little." "Your scans are correct," Chen replied with what sounded like amusement. "The Drifting Dream isn't worth much by conventional standards. Maybe $7, if you could find someone desperate enough to buy it. $7. Vex Translator took a moment to convert the human currency into galactic standard credits. The result was so insignificant that it barely registered as a number. He'd spent more than that on his last meal. Then, why? Vex asked slowly, are you wasting my time? Because, Captain, you're not looking at this the right way. You're thinking like a pirate, focused on immediate value. But, I'm thinking like a businessman, and I see an opportunity that could benefit both of us. This was rapidly becoming the strangest pirate raid of Vex's career. Usually his conversations with victims involved significantly more screaming and considerably fewer business propositions. Explain, he said curtly. You're familiar with the Nexus Banking Consortium, I assume? Vex's blood went cold. Every criminal in the galaxy knew about Nexus Banking. They handled financial transactions for half the legitimate businesses in civilized space, and their security was legendary. They also had a reputation for hunting down anyone who stole from them with relentless persistence. What about them? Vex asked carefully. They've been having a problem lately. Someone's been systematically draining accounts across 17 star systems. Small amounts from each account, but it adds up. Current estimates put the total theft at somewhere around 42 billion galactic standard credits. 42 billion. The number hung in the air like a physical presence. Vex had never stolen more than a few million in a single operation, and that had taken months of planning and considerable risk. And this concerns me how? Vex asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Because the thief is sitting in your brig right now, Captain. And the 42 billion credits are sitting in the cargo hold of this $7 ship. The bridge of the Shadowhawk fell completely silent. Vex could hear the subtle hum of life support systems and the distant vibration of the engines, but none of his crew made a sound. They were all staring at the comm unit as if Chen might crawl through it. That's impossible, Drex finally said. We scanned your cargo hold. 5 tons of mixed goods, nothing exotic. You scanned correctly, Chen agreed. But you didn't scan deep enough. The 42 billion isn't sitting in a vault or stored in physical currency. It's distributed across 17,000 separate accounts in the Nexus banking system, each one linked to a quantum encrypted access key. And all 17,000 keys are embedded in what appears to be a very ordinary shipping container full of industrial lubricants. Vex's mind raced. Quantum encryption was theoretically unbreakable, which was why banks used it. But if someone had found a way to crack it, or better yet, to generate valid keys. Why are you telling me this? Vex asked. Because I need transport, Captain. Nexus Banking has figured out they've been robbed, and they've put together quite an impressive hunting party to find their missing money. I've managed to stay ahead of them so far, but this ship won't outrun a flea, let alone a Nexus security squadron. And, in exchange for transport, you're offering what? A share of the money? I'm offering you all of it. The silence that followed was even deeper than before. Vex felt his heart beating faster as the implications sank in. 42 billion credits would make him the wealthiest pirate in the galaxy. He could buy his own fleet, maybe his own planet. But it sounded too good to be true, which in his experience meant it almost certainly was. What's the catch? He asked. The catch is that the money is useless unless you can access it, and accessing it requires specific knowledge that only I possess. The quantum keys aren't just random data. They're part of a larger system I designed, and that system has some very particular requirements. Such as? Physical proximity to the keys during access, biometric verification from me personally, and a very specific sequence of commands that changes daily based on an algorithm I haven't shared with anyone. Vex considered this. It was clever, assuming it was true. Chen would be valuable alive and worthless dead, which gave him considerable leverage. But it also raised questions. Why steal the money in the first place? With your apparent skills, you could have made a fortune legitimately. Chen was quiet for a moment before answering. Let's just say that Nexus Banking and I have a history. They took something from me, and I took something from them. The difference is that what they took can't be given back. There was something in the human's voice that suggested a deeper story, but Vex didn't care about motivation. He cared about opportunity. Assuming I believe you, Vex said slowly, what exactly are you proposing? Simple. Transport me to the Kepler station in the Outer Rim. It's neutral territory, outside Nexus Banking's direct jurisdiction. Once we're there, I'll transfer half the money to accounts of your choosing, and we part ways as wealthy individuals. Half? It's 21 billion credits, Captain. I think that qualifies as generous. It was more than generous. It was a fortune beyond Vex's wildest dreams. But it was also the kind of opportunity that came with equally enormous risks. Let's say I'm interested, Vex said carefully. What guarantee do I have that you won't simply disappear once we reach Kepler station? The same guarantee you're giving me that you won't space me the moment you think you can access the money without my help, Chen replied. Mutual dependence, Captain. It's the foundation of all good partnerships. Vex found himself actually liking this human. Chen understood the criminal mindset, knew how to negotiate from a position of weakness, and had apparently pulled off one of the largest thefts in galactic history using nothing more than a $7 cargo hauler. But there were still problems. Nexus Banking didn't give up easily, and harboring their money would make the Shadowhawk a target for every bounty hunter and security force in the galaxy. How long before they track us down? Vex asked. Hard to say. They know I'm in this general sector, but the Drifting Dream is registered under multiple shell corporations. It could take them days or weeks to trace it back to me directly. And once we transfer to your ship, the trail goes cold. Until they scan every vessel in the sector. Which they can't do legally without probable cause. And obtaining probable cause requires going through 3 different bureaucratic systems that don't particularly like Nexus Banking. We've got time, Captain, but not unlimited time. Vex made his decision. The risks were enormous, but so was the potential reward. And, in his experience, the biggest rewards always came with the biggest risks. Signal the boarding team, he ordered Drex. Have them transfer all cargo from the Drifting Dream to our hold. Handle everything carefully. And the human? Drex asked. Bring him over as well. It seems Mr. Chen and I have business to discuss. As his crew began the transfer operation, Vex allowed himself a moment of anticipation. If Chen was telling the truth, the Corvani Syndicate was about to become the wealthiest criminal organization in the galaxy. If he was lying, Vex would space him and go back to robbing cargo haulers. But something in the human's voice suggested he wasn't lying. Marcus Chen had the calm confidence of a man who had planned extensively and was executing that plan exactly as intended. Course for Kepler station, sir, asked his navigator. Not yet, Vex replied. First, we're going to have a very detailed conversation with our guest about exactly how his little system works. I want to understand what we're dealing with before we commit to anything. And if Nexus Security finds us while we're talking? Vex's mandibles clicked in what passed for a smile among his species. Then, Mr. Chen had better be very convincing very quickly. The transfer was completed within an hour. The cargo from the Drifting Dream looked exactly as unremarkable as the scans had suggested, sealed containers labeled as industrial lubricants, replacement parts for atmospheric processors, and various other mundane supplies. Nothing that would attract attention or suggest the presence of 42 billion stolen credits. Marcus Chen was equally unremarkable in person. Average height for a human, brown hair starting to show gray at the temples, wearing the kind of practical clothing favored by cargo pilots throughout the galaxy. He could have been any of 10,000 humans Vex had encountered in his criminal career. But his eyes were different. They held the kind of calculating intelligence Vex had learned to respect, combined with something that might have been sadness. This was a man who had lost something important and decided to take revenge. Impressive ship, Shin said as Vex guards escorted him through the corridors of the Shadowhawk. Modified hegemony assault cruiser, if I'm not mistaken. You've upgraded the engines and added additional shielding. You know ships, Vex observed. I know a lot of things, Captain. It's kept me alive so far. They reached Vex's private office, a comfortable space that served double duty as an interrogation room when necessary. Chen settled into the offered chair without apparent nervousness, looking around with professional interest. "Nice setup," he commented. "The art is particularly impressive. Corthanian battle sculptures, unless I'm mistaken." Vex studied his guest more carefully. The sculptures were worth a fortune and were recognizable only to those with extensive knowledge of galactic culture. This wasn't just an educated cargo pilot. "Who are you, really?" Vex asked. "Exactly who I said I am. Marcus Chen, former cargo pilot, current thief." "But I wasn't always a cargo pilot. What were you before?" Chen smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I was a systems architect for Nexus Banking. Senior level, with access to their core security protocols. I helped design the quantum encryption system that's currently keeping their money safe." "And what made you decide to steal from your former employer?" "They killed my daughter." The simple statement hung in the air between them. Vex had heard a lot of motivations for crime over the years, but revenge was always the most dangerous. It made people unpredictable, willing to take risks that rational criminals would avoid. "How?" Vex asked. "Medical emergency. Exotic cancer that required specialized treatment. Expensive treatment. I had insurance through Nexus, comprehensive coverage that should have paid for everything." Chen's voice remained steady, but Vex could hear the underlying anger. "They found a technical loophole in the policy and denied the claim. Said the treatment was experimental and, therefore, not covered." "You couldn't pay for it yourself?" "I tried. Liquidated everything I owned, borrowed against future earnings, even sold my house. It wasn't enough. The treatment cost 8 million credits, and I could only raise 6. Chen's hands clenched slightly. "She died 3 days before I would have had the money." Vex understood now. This wasn't simple theft. It was a very personal war between a grieving father and the corporation that had let his child die for the sake of profit. The fact that Chen had chosen to steal exactly 42 billion suggested a specific significance to that number. "How much did they save by denying the claim?" Vex asked. 2 million credits. They saved 2 million credits and earned 42 billion in interest and investments over the next 5 years while I planned my revenge. Chen's smile was cold. "I thought it was appropriate to take back exactly what they gained from my daughter's death." "And how does a systems architect plan to steal 42 billion credits?" "Very carefully, Captain. Very carefully." Chen opened a small device that looked like a standard datapad but had several modifications Vex didn't recognize. Numbers and symbols scrolled across the screen in patterns that seemed almost hypnotic. "The quantum encryption system I helped design has one weakness," Chen continued. "It requires periodic validation to ensure the keys haven't been compromised. That validation process involves accessing the central security database and confirming the integrity of each key individually. And I wrote the validation software. Every key that gets validated also gets copied to a secure backup system, just in case the primary database is damaged. But I also wrote the backup system." Vex was beginning to understand. "You built a backdoor." "Multiple backdoors, actually. And I've been using them to systematically drain accounts for the past 6 months. Small amounts from each account, spread across thousands of transactions, using routing protocols that make the theft look like normal market fluctuations. Until someone noticed the pattern. Until someone noticed that accounts were being drained exactly as fast as they could be without triggering automatic security reviews. I got a little too clever with the algorithm." Chen showed Vex the datapad. The scrolling numbers resolved into what appeared to be account listings, each showing a balance and a series of transaction codes. 17,000 accounts, each containing between 1 and 5 million credits. All accessed using legitimate quantum keys that I generated myself using the same systems Nexus uses for their actual keys. The authorities can't tell the difference? The authorities can't tell because there is no difference. As far as the Nexus banking system is concerned, these are legitimate accounts owned by legitimate customers. The only problem is that all those customers happen to be me. Vex stared at the scrolling numbers, trying to comprehend the scope of what Chen had accomplished. It wasn't just theft. It was a fundamental manipulation of the galactic banking system, carried out by someone with intimate knowledge of its weaknesses. Why hide the keys in industrial lubricant? Vex asked. Because no one looks twice at industrial lubricant. It's boring, it's cheap, and it's exactly the kind of cargo a washed-up pilot would haul between systems. But the quantum storage medium I used requires a very specific chemical environment to maintain stability. Industrial lubricant happens to provide that environment perfectly. Chen touched another control on his datapad, and the screen showed a technical schematic that made Vex's head hurt just looking at it. Each key is embedded in a crystalline matrix suspended in the lubricant. The crystals are smaller than viruses and completely undetectable unless you know exactly what to look for. Even then, you'd need quantum-level scanning equipment and about 6 hours per container to find them. And without the keys? Without the keys, the money might as well not exist. Nexus Banking will eventually figure out which accounts have been compromised, but recovering the actual funds will require breaking quantum encryption. Current estimates suggest that would take approximately 40,000 years with the best computers available. Vex leaned back in his chair, processing everything Chen had told him. It was brilliant, audacious, and completely insane. It was also, assuming Chen was telling the truth, the perfect crime. What do you need from me? Vex asked. Safe passage to Kepler Station. Protection from Nexus security if they catch up to us. And a guarantee that you won't kill me the moment you think you can access the money without my help. And, in return? 21 billion credits, transferred to whatever accounts you specify. Enough to make you the wealthiest pirate in the galaxy. Vex considered the offer. The money was tempting, incredibly so. But harboring a thief wanted by Nexus Banking would make him a target for every law enforcement agency in civilized space. How do I know you won't disappear the moment we reach Kepler Station? Because I need something that only you can provide, Captain. I need time to complete the transfer, and I need protection while I'm doing it. The account access process takes approximately 6 hours, and it requires my constant attention. I'll be completely vulnerable during that time. 6 hours? The quantum encryption system was designed to prevent exactly this kind of theft. Each key has to be accessed individually, validated against the central database, and then used to authorize a single transaction. Multiply that by 17,000 accounts, and it adds up to considerable time. Chen touched his datapad again, and the screen showed what appeared to be a countdown timer. I've already begun the preliminary access sequence, he said. We have approximately 48 hours before Nexus Banking's security algorithms will detect the unauthorized access pattern. After that, all the keys will be automatically invalidated, and the money will be lost forever. 48 hours. It was tight, but manageable. Kepler Station was only 36 hours away at maximum speed. Agreed, Vex said. But I want some insurance of my own. Such as? You'll begin the transfer process now. 1 billion credits to an account I specify, just to prove your system works. Consider it a down payment. Chen nodded, apparently having expected this. Reasonable. I'll need access to a secure communication array to reach the Nexus banking system. You'll have it. But, Mr. Chen? Yes, Captain? If you're running some kind of elaborate con, if there's no money or if your system doesn't work, I will space you. Slowly. Chen's smile was completely genuine this time. Captain, if I'm running a con elaborate enough to fool Nexus banking security systems for 6 months, I think I deserve whatever money I can get. Despite himself, Vex found himself laughing. This human was either completely insane or completely brilliant. Possibly both. Signal the engine room, Vex ordered his communication officer. Maximum speed for Kepler Station. And, get me a secure channel to the Nexus banking network. Aye, sir. As his crew prepared for departure, Vex watched Marcus Chen access his datapad with practiced efficiency. Numbers scrolled across the screen in patterns that suggested enormous complexity, but Chen navigated them with the ease of lone familiarity. "Transfer in progress," Chen announced. 1 billion credits to the account you specified. Should be complete within 10 minutes. Vex felt his heart racing as he waited. 1 billion credits would be the largest single score of his career, even if the rest of Chen's story turned out to be fabrication. "Captain," his communication officer called out, "incoming message from Nexus Security. They're requesting permission to scan our vessel for stolen property." Vex felt his blood chill. "How did they find us so quickly?" "Unknown, sir. The message is being transmitted on all frequencies to every ship in the sector." Chen looked up from his datapad with mild concern. "They're moving faster than I expected. We should leave immediately." "Transfer complete," the communication officer announced. 1 billion credits confirmed deposited to the specified account. Vex allowed himself a moment of pure satisfaction. The money was real. Chen's system worked. And they were about to become very, very wealthy. "Helm, take us out of here. Maximum speed." "Aye, Captain." As the Shadowhawk jumped to faster than light speed, Vex settled back to watch Marcus Chen work his magic with the most sophisticated theft in galactic history. Behind them, Nexus Security was undoubtedly scrambling to follow their trail. But ahead lay Kepler Station, neutral territory, and 21 billion credits in stolen money. It was, Vex reflected, shaping up to be a very interesting week. The Shadowhawk had been traveling at maximum speed for 18 hours when the first warning came through. Vex was in his private quarters, reviewing the financial transfers Chen had been making throughout the journey, when his tactical officer's voice crackled over the intercom. "Captain, to the bridge, urgent." Vex found Shin already there, standing beside the main tactical display with an expression of mild concern. The human had been working almost continuously since they'd left the drifting dream behind, methodically accessing account after account and transferring funds to the secure accounts Vex had specified. "What's the situation?" Vex asked. Drex gestured to the long-range sensors. 3 vessels approaching from behind. Configuration matches Nexus banking security ships, and they're gaining on us. How is that possible? We have a 12-hour head start. Chen looked up from a portable data terminal he'd been using to monitor his transfers. They've got better ships than we thought. Probably military-grade pursuit vessels. Those can do twice our maximum speed. Vex studied the tactical display with growing unease. The 3 ships were indeed closing the gap, and, at their current rate of approach, they'd intercept the Shadowhawk in less than 6 hours. "Can we outrun them?" he asked his navigator. "Negative, Captain. Our engines are already running at maximum capacity. If we push them harder, we risk a catastrophic failure. Then, we fight." "Against Nexus Security?" Chen asked. "Captain, those ships are armed with military-grade weapons and crewed by some of the best pilots in the galaxy. They make a living hunting down criminals like us." Vex's mandibles clicked rapidly as he considered their options. Running wasn't possible, and fighting 3 security vessels simultaneously would be suicide. But surrendering would mean losing everything they'd worked for. "How much more money needs to be transferred?" he asked Chun. "About 14 billion credits across 8,000 accounts. At current transfer rates, I need another 20 hours to complete the process." 20 hours. They had 6 before the security ships caught up to them. "Can you speed up the process?" Chen shook his head. The quantum encryption system has built-in delays to prevent exactly this kind of mass transfer. Each transaction has to be individually validated, and the validation process takes time. If I try to rush it, the security algorithms will detect the anomaly and shut down all the accounts. Vex turned to his tactical officer. "What about their weapons?" "Military-grade plasma cannons and quantum torpedoes. Our shields might last 5 minutes under concentrated fire." "And our weapons?" "Effective against civilian targets, but those security ships have military-grade armor. We might damage them, but we can't disable them." It was a hopeless situation. Vex had led the Corvani Syndicate for 15 years by knowing when to fight and when to find another solution. This was definitely a time for another solution. Options, he asked his crew. We could jettison the cargo, suggested his navigator. Without the stolen money, Nexus Security has no jurisdiction over us. And lose 21 billion credits? Vex replied. I don't think so. Chen looked up from his data terminal with sudden interest. Actually, Captain, that might not be a bad idea. You want to give up the money? I want to appear to give up the money. How good are your ship's fabrication systems? Vex frowned. Standard industrial fabricators. We use them for spare parts and emergency repairs. Why? Can they produce shipping containers that look identical to the ones we're carrying? Probably. But I don't see how that helps us. Chen's smile was distinctly predatory. Because we're going to give Nexus Security exactly what they're looking for, and they're going to be very happy to get it. Understanding dawned on Vex slowly. You want to make fake containers. I want to make containers that appear to contain the quantum storage keys, complete with fake chemical signatures and false quantum readings. The security scans will show exactly what they expect to find. And the real containers? Stay hidden aboard your ship. I've been studying your cargo manifest, Captain. You've got 17 tons of spare durasteel plating in your forward hold. Very boring, very unremarkable cargo that no one would bother to scan closely. Vex was beginning to understand Chen's plan, and he had to admit it was clever. You want to hide the real containers among the durasteel. Exactly. We transfer the quantum keys to smaller, less obvious containers and mix them in with your existing cargo. Then, we jettison the fakes and act like defeated criminals. Will it work? It should. Nexus Security is looking for specific quantum signatures, not the containers themselves. If the fakes give off the right signatures, they'll assume they've recovered the stolen money. And, when they discover the deception? That depends on how thorough their analysis is. The fakes will fool a standard security scan, but a detailed quantum analysis will reveal them as counterfeits. However, that kind of analysis takes days, and it's usually done back at Nexus banking headquarters. Vex considered the plan. It was risky, but it was better than a suicidal fight against 3 military-grade security vessels. How long will it take to prepare the fakes? 6 hours, if your fabrication systems are as good as you claim. I'll need to synthesize the chemical compounds and program the quantum signatures, but it's doable. And the transfer of the real containers? 2 hours, once the fakes are ready. But, Captain, there's one more thing you need to consider. What? Chen's expression grew serious. Once we jettison the fakes, Nexus Security will board your ship to verify that all the stolen property has been recovered. They'll want to search every compartment, scan every piece of cargo, and interrogate every crew member. So you'll need a believable cover story for how you acquired the containers in the first place, and you'll need to make sure your crew can stick to that story under pressure. Vex thought about his crew. They were pirates, not actors, but they'd survived this long by being smart as well as ruthless. What kind of story? He asked. Simple is best. You intercepted a cargo hauler 3 days ago and took everything valuable. The hauler's pilot claimed the containers held industrial lubricant, so you kept them thinking you might be able to sell the contents. You had no idea they contained stolen money. And the pilot? Spaced him after you took his cargo. No witnesses, no complications. It was a plausible story, the kind of thing pirates did every day throughout the galaxy. Nexus Security would have no reason to doubt it, especially if they recovered what appeared to be the stolen money. All right, Vex decided. We go with your plan. How much help do you need? A fabrication team and access to your chemical synthesizers. I'll handle the quantum programming myself. You'll have whatever you need. Drex, assign a team to assist Mr. Chen. Everyone else, prepare for a Nexus Security boarding. As his crew scattered to carry out their orders, Vex watched Chen dive into the technical details of creating fake quantum storage containers. The human worked with the focused intensity of someone whose life depended on getting every detail right. Because, Vex reflected, that was exactly what was happening. The next few hours passed in a blur of frantic activity. Chen worked with the fabrication team to create containers that were physically identical to the ones they'd taken from the drifting dream, while simultaneously programming quantum signatures that would fool Nexus security scanners. The chemical compounds are the easy part, Chen explained as he monitored the synthesis process. Industrial lubricant is simple to manufacture, and the quantum storage crystals can be simulated using standard holographic projectors. And the quantum signatures? More complex, but manageable. I know exactly what the security scanners are looking for because I helped design them. The trick is creating false readings that match their expectations without triggering any of the deeper analysis protocols. Vex watched the fabrication process with fascination. The fake containers looked absolutely identical to the real ones, complete with shipping labels and wear patterns that suggested months of transport. How can you be sure this will work? He asked. Because I've tested it before. Not on this scale, obviously, but I spent 6 months learning to fool Nexus Banking's security systems. This is just an extension of the same principles. You've done this before? Small-scale tests to make sure my theft algorithm would work. I created fake accounts, generated false quantum keys, and then successfully withdrew money from the fake accounts without triggering any security alerts. Chen's confidence was reassuring, but Vex still felt nervous. They were betting everything on the assumption that Nexus Security would be satisfied with recovering apparent stolen property without conducting a detailed analysis. Containers complete, announced the fabrication team leader. Chen immediately began transferring the quantum signatures from his data pad to the fake containers. The process involved connecting his terminal to each container individually and uploading complex data patterns that would register as stolen money on Nexus security scanners. How long will the signatures last? Vex asked. Indefinitely, assuming they're not subjected to detailed quantum analysis. The holographic projectors will maintain the illusion as long as they have power. And if Nexus security scans them closely? The deception will hold up to anything short of a laboratory-grade analysis. By the time they figure out they've been fooled, we'll be long gone. The transfer of real containers to their hiding places among the durasteel plating took exactly 2 hours, as Chen had predicted. The quantum storage keys were moved to smaller, less conspicuous containers that looked like spare parts or maintenance supplies. Perfect, Chen said as the last real container disappeared among the legitimate cargo. Now we wait for our guests to arrive. They didn't have to wait long. Nexus Security made contact exactly 4 hours and 37 minutes after the fabrication process was complete. Unknown vessel, this is Commander Sarah Walsh of Nexus Banking Security. You are harboring stolen property and are ordered to submit to immediate boarding and search. Vex activated the communication system with what he hoped was appropriate reluctance. This is Captain Corvani of the Shadowhawk. What stolen property? 42 billion credits in illegally accessed funds, contained in quantum storage devices aboard your vessel. Prepare to be boarded. I don't know anything about 42 billion credits, Vex replied, putting just the right note of confusion in his voice. We're carrying industrial lubricant and spare parts. Our scans indicate otherwise. Reduce speed and prepare for boarding, or we will disable your vessel. Vex looked at Chen, who nodded and gestured toward the cargo hold where the fake containers were stored. Fine, Vex said into the communicator. But this is harassment. We're legitimate cargo haulers. Stand by for boarding party. The Nexus security team that came aboard was professional, efficient, and extremely well armed. Commander Walsh was a tall, severe woman with the bearing of someone accustomed to command. Her boarding party consisted of 12 heavily armed security specialists and 3 technical experts carrying sophisticated scanning equipment. Captain Corvani, Walsh said as she stepped onto the bridge, you're suspected of harboring property stolen from Nexus Banking. We have authorization to search your vessel and confiscate any illegal materials. Search away, Vex replied with what he hoped was convincing resignation. But, you're not going to find 42 billion credits on a ship like this. Walsh gestured to her technical team, who immediately began scanning the ship with handheld devices. Within minutes, they'd located the fake containers in the cargo hold. "Commander," one of the technicians reported, "we've got positive quantum signatures from 17 containers in the forward hold. Readings are consistent with the stolen storage devices." Walsh allowed herself a satisfied smile. "Captain Corvani, you're under arrest for possession of stolen property." "Wait a minute," Vex protested. "I had no idea what was in those containers. We took them off a cargo hauler 3 days ago. The pilot said they contained industrial lubricant." "Where is this pilot now?" Vex shrugged. "Spaced him after we took his cargo. Standard procedure." "How convenient. No witnesses to your story." "Look," Vex said, putting desperation into his voice, "you've got your stolen property back. That's what you wanted, right? Just take the containers and leave us alone." Walsh studied him carefully. "The containers and everything in them belong to Nexus Banking. We're confiscating the entire shipment." "Fine. Take them. But I want it on record that we had no idea they contained stolen money." "Your objection is noted. Sergeant, transfer all 17 containers to our ship. I want them secured for transport back to headquarters." As the security team began moving the fake containers, Vex watched Chun from the corner of his eye. The human was playing his role perfectly, appearing nervous but not overly so, like a cargo pilot who'd gotten caught up in something bigger than he'd expected. "Commander," one of the technicians called out, "quantum signatures are consistent with our target parameters. These appear to be the genuine storage devices." "Excellent. Continue the transfer." It took 90 minutes to move all 17 fake containers to the Nexus security ship. During that time, Walsh's team conducted a thorough search of the Shadowhawk, but they found nothing suspicious among the legitimate cargo. "Captain Corvani," Walsh said as the transfer was completed, "you're free to go. But if we discover you had knowledge of the theft, we will find you." "Understood," Vex replied. "Can we leave now?" "You can leave. But, Captain?" Walsh paused at the airlock. "Next time you board a cargo hauler, you might want to ask more questions about what you're stealing." As the Nexus security ships departed with their fake prize, Vex felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. The deception had worked perfectly, but they still had 14 billion credits worth of transfers to complete. "How long before they discover the deception?" he asked Chen. "Hard to say. If they run standard verification scans, the fake signatures will hold up indefinitely. But if they subject the containers to detailed quantum analysis..." Chen shrugged. "Could be days, could be weeks." "And the transfers?" "I can complete them in 18 hours, assuming we reach Kepler Station without further interruption." Vex looked at the tactical display, where the Nexus security ships were disappearing into faster-than-light travel. "They're gone. We're clear." "For now," Chen agreed. "But, Captain, there's something else you should consider." "What?" "Once I complete the transfers at Kepler Station, Marcus Chen will effectively cease to exist. The identity was always temporary, designed to give me a plausible cover while I completed the theft." "And, after Marcus Chen disappears?" "After that, I become someone else entirely. New identity, new background, new life. Nexus Banking will spend years looking for a dead man." Vex found himself curious about what Chen would become, but he suspected that information wouldn't be shared. The human had proven to be remarkably good at keeping secrets. "The money transfer will still happen?" "Absolutely. 21 billion credits, as promised. Consider it my thanks for an excellent partnership." "And the other half?" Chen's smile was mysterious. "The other half will disappear just as completely as Marcus Chen. Nexus Banking will never recover a single credit." As the Shadowhawk continued toward Kepler Station, Vex reflected on the most profitable partnership of his criminal career. In less than 24 hours, he would be the wealthiest pirate in the galaxy, and Nexus Banking would be wondering how 42 billion credits had simply vanished. It was, he thought, a very satisfying form of justice. But first, they had to reach Kepler Station alive. And, judging by Chen's continuing work at his data terminal, there were still thousands of individual transfers to complete before the quantum storage keys would release their stolen treasure. Estimated arrival at Kepler Station? Vex asked his navigator. 16 hours, Captain. Maintain current speed and course. And keep scanning for pursuit vessels. I want to know immediately if anyone else is following us. Aye, sir. As night cycles settled over the ship, Vex watched Marcus Chen continue his methodical work. Transfer after transfer, account after account, the human was systematically looting Nexus Banking's coffers with nothing more than a data terminal and an intimate knowledge of their security systems. Tomorrow, they would reach Kepler Station. Tomorrow, Vex would become incredibly wealthy. And, tomorrow, Marcus Chen would disappear forever, leaving behind only a reputation as the man who stole 42 billion credits with a $7 cargo ship. It was, Vex reflected, exactly the kind of story that would become legend among pirates throughout the galaxy. Kepler Station hung in space like a massive metal flower, its 6 docking arms extending outward from a central hub that housed nearly 2 million inhabitants. As neutral territory administered by the Independent Worlds Coalition, it served as a haven for traders, smugglers, and anyone else who needed to conduct business away from the major galactic powers. Captain Vex Corvani watched the station grow larger on his main screen as the Shadowhawk approached the outer navigation beacons. Beside him, Marcus Chen worked steadily at his data terminal, making final adjustments to the most audacious theft in galactic history. Docking clearance received, announced the navigation officer. They've assigned us berth 47 on the commercial arm. Understood. Take us in slowly. Vex was nervous, though he tried not to show it. They'd made it this far without further pursuit, but Kepler Station was crawling with information brokers, bounty hunters, and security agents from a dozen different organizations. If word of their cargo somehow leaked out. Transfer status, he asked Chun. 93% complete. About 2 hours of work remaining, assuming we can maintain the connection to the banking network. Any problems with the fake containers? Chen shook his head. Nexus Security transported them to a secure facility on Proxima Station. According to the tracking data I've been monitoring, they won't begin detailed analysis for another 6 days. We're well clear. As the Shadowhawk settled into its assigned berth, Vex felt a moment of profound satisfaction. They'd outrun 3 security ships, fooled one of the galaxy's most sophisticated investigative organizations, and were about to complete a transfer that would make them incredibly wealthy. Station security is requesting a manifest of our cargo, the communication officer reported. Standard procedure, Vex replied. Send them our legitimate inventory. Industrial supplies and spare parts. The manifest was accepted without question, and, within an hour they were cleared for normal commercial operations. Vex assigned half his crew to shore leave while the others remained aboard to guard their valuable cargo. I'll need a secure location to complete the final transfers, Chen said as they walked through the station's main commercial district. Somewhere with military-grade encryption and protection from surveillance. I know a place, Vex replied. The Corvani Syndicate maintains a safe house in the restricted commercial sector. It's designed for exactly this kind of sensitive business. The safe house was a nondescript office suite that could have belonged to any of thousands of legitimate businesses operating on Kepler Station. But, behind its mundane facade lay some of the most sophisticated security and communication equipment available outside military installations. Chen whistled appreciatively as he examined the quantum-encrypted communication array. This is impressive hardware. Corporate or military grade? Let's just say it fell off the back of a transport, Vex replied with amusement. Will it serve your needs? Perfectly. I can complete the final transfers from here without any risk of interception or tracking. As Chen began connecting his equipment to the communication array, Vex settled back to watch. After 36 hours of tension and uncertainty, it was strange to think that the most dangerous part of their plan was simply waiting for numbers to change on a computer screen. Transfer sequence initiated, Chen announced. Final phase will take approximately 90 minutes. And then, you'll be 21 billion credits richer, and I'll disappear forever. Vex studied the human who had made this incredible wealth possible. There was still something mysterious about Marcus Chen, something that suggested depths of planning and preparation that went far beyond what he'd revealed. "What will you do with your half of the money?" Vex asked. Chen was quiet for a long moment. "I'm going to build something," he said finally. "A medical research foundation, focused on treatments for exotic cancers. Free treatment for anyone who needs it, regardless of their ability to pay." "In your daughter's name?" "In memory of everyone who died because they couldn't afford treatment. She wasn't the first, and she won't be the last. But, maybe, with enough resources, we can save some of the others." It was a noble goal, Vex reflected. Using stolen money to save lives that corporate greed had condemned. There was a certain poetic justice to it. "First transfer complete," Chen announced. 5 billion credits to your primary account." Vex checked his personal financial terminal and felt his heart skip a beat. The number was real, verified, and completely legitimate according to the galactic banking system. "Second transfer initiated," Chen continued. "This will be the largest single transaction." As the minutes passed, Vex watched his account balance climb to figures he'd never imagined. 10 billion. 15 billion. 20 billion. By the time Chen announced the completion of the final transfer, Vex Corvani was officially the wealthiest pirate in the galaxy. 21 billion, 400 million credits, Chen said with satisfaction. "As promised." "And your half?" Chen gestured to his data terminal, where accounts scattered across the galaxy showed balances that added up to an identical sum. Safely distributed across 300 accounts in 17 different banking systems. Even if Nexus Banking somehow traced the original theft, they'd never be able to follow the money through that many jurisdictions. "What happens to the quantum storage keys?" "They'll self-destruct in 6 hours. The crystalline matrices are designed to dissolve once the data has been accessed, leaving nothing but ordinary industrial lubricant." Vex marveled at the completeness of Chen's planning. Every detail had been considered, every possible complication anticipated. It was the work of someone who had spent years preparing for this moment. "There's one thing I still don't understand," Vex said. "Why did you need me? With your skills and resources, you could have escaped Nexus security on your own." Chen smiled. "Could I? My ship was falling apart, my identity was compromised, and I had 42 billion credits worth of stolen data that was useless unless I could find a way to transfer it safely. I needed a partner, Captain. Someone with the resources and reputation to provide protection during the most vulnerable part of the operation." "And you chose pirates over legitimate business partners?" "I chose someone who would understand the risks and be appropriately motivated by the rewards. Corporate executives might have been frightened away by the legal implications. Pirates, on the other hand. Pirates see opportunity where others see danger." "Exactly." As Chen began shutting down his equipment, Vex reflected on the past 2 days. They'd committed the perfect crime, outsmarted one of the galaxy's most powerful corporations, and accumulated enough wealth to live like kings for the rest of their lives. "So what now?" Vex asked. "Marcus Chen disappears, and you become someone else?" "Marcus Chen died in a transport accident in the Outer Rim 3 days ago. Very tragic. No survivors." Chen's smile was mysterious. "The man you're talking to right now is someone entirely different." "And who might that be?" "Dr. James Harrison, recently retired medical researcher with a substantial inheritance from a wealthy uncle. Planning to establish a charitable foundation focused on medical research. Even the false identity was carefully planned." Vex found himself impressed despite everything he'd already seen of Chen's capabilities. "Will we meet again?" "I doubt it, Captain. Dr. Harrison moves in very different circles than pirates and smugglers. But, if you're ever in need of medical treatment." Chen handed Vex a small card. "The Harrison Foundation will always be happy to help." As they prepared to part ways, Vex felt an unexpected moment of regret. Working with Marcus Chen had been the most intellectually stimulating experience of his criminal career. The human had shown him possibilities he'd never imagined. "Any advice for the newly wealthy?" Vex asked. Diversify your investments, avoid anything connected to Nexus banking, and don't spend so much that you attract attention. 21 billion credits is enough to live comfortably for several lifetimes, but it's also enough to make you a target if you're not careful. Understood. They shook hands, a gesture that seemed oddly formal after everything they'd been through together. It's been a pleasure doing business with you, Captain. Likewise, Dr. Harrison. Chen gathered his equipment and walked out of the safe house without looking back. Vex watched him go, knowing he would probably never see the man again. Marcus Chen would disappear into the anonymous crowds of Kepler Station, and Dr. James Harrison would emerge somewhere else entirely. Alone in the safe house, Vex allowed himself a moment of pure satisfaction. He was 21 billion credits richer, his crew was safe, and Nexus banking would never know what had hit them. It was, by any measure, the perfect score. But, as he prepared to return to his ship, Vex's communication terminal chimed with an incoming message. The sender identification showed Nexus banking security, and the priority code indicated urgent business. With growing unease, Vex activated the message. Commander Walsh's face appeared on the screen, and her expression was anything but friendly. Captain Corvani, this is Commander Walsh. I'm transmitting this message to every ship that departed the sector in the past 48 hours because we have a problem. Vex felt his blood chill as Walsh continued. The containers we recovered from your vessel were fakes. Sophisticated fakes, but fakes nonetheless. The real quantum storage devices are still missing, along with 42 billion credits in stolen money. The message paused as Walsh leaned forward, her eyes boring directly into the camera. Someone played us, Captain. Someone with extensive knowledge of our security systems and the technical skills to fool our best analysts. Someone who knew exactly what we were looking for and how to give us a convincing substitute. Vex's mind raced as he considered the implications. Nexus Security had discovered the deception faster than Chen had expected. We're issuing new arrest warrants for every vessel that was in the sector during our search. This includes your ship, Captain Corvani. We'll be conducting additional searches of every suspect vessel, and this time we'll be looking much more carefully. The message ended with coordinates for a rendezvous point and orders to report for immediate re-inspection. Vex stared at the blank screen, processing what he'd just heard. Nexus Security was coming back. They knew they'd been fooled, and they were going to search every ship in the sector until they found the real stolen money. But there was no real stolen money aboard the Shadowhawk. Chen had transferred all of it electronically, and the quantum storage devices would self-destruct in less than 6 hours. Even if Nexus Security found the empty containers, there would be no evidence of theft. Vex activated his communication system and contacted his ship. This is the captain. Prepare for immediate departure. We're leaving Kepler Station now. Sir, came Drex's confused voice. I thought we were staying for 48 hours. Plans have changed. I want us ready to depart in 30 minutes. Aye, Captain. As Vex made his way back to the docking bay, he reflected on the irony of the situation. They'd successfully stolen 42 billion credits and transferred it safely, but they were about to become fugitives anyway because Nexus Security couldn't accept that they'd been outwitted. But that was Marcus Chen's problem, not his. Dr. James Harrison would disappear into the galaxy with 21 billion credits and a new identity, while Captain Vex Corvani would go back to being a pirate with an unimaginably large bank account. Departure clearance requested, his navigation officer reported as Vex reached the bridge. Granted, came the response from station control. Safe travels, Shadowhawk. As the ship cleared Kepler Station's navigation perimeter, Vex settled back in his command chair and considered his options. 21 billion credits opened up possibilities he'd never imagined. He could retire to a private planet, buy his own fleet, or simply disappear into comfortable anonymity. Course, Captain, asked his navigator. The Helix Nebula, Vex replied. Time for the Corvani Syndicate to disappear for a while. As the Shadowhawk jumped to faster-than-light speed, Vex allowed himself a final moment of appreciation for Marcus Chen's incredible planning. The man had stolen 42 billion credits, fooled the galaxy's most sophisticated security organization, and vanished without a trace. But, more than that, he'd shown that sometimes the best revenge wasn't violence or destruction. Sometimes it was simply taking what your enemy valued most and using it for something they would hate. Nexus Banking had killed Chen's daughter to save 2 million credits. In response, Chen had stolen 42 billion and was planning to use it to provide free medical treatment to anyone who needed it. They would spend more money investigating the theft than they would have spent saving his daughter's life. It was, Vex reflected, a masterpiece of poetic justice. 3 months later, the Galactic News Networks carried a small announcement about the establishment of the Harrison Foundation for Medical Research. The foundation's mission was to provide free treatment for exotic cancers and other expensive medical conditions, funded by a generous donation from the estate of Dr. James Harrison's recently deceased uncle. The same news cycle carried reports of Nexus Banking's ongoing investigation into the theft of 42 billion credits. Despite extensive efforts involving multiple security agencies and some of the galaxy's best forensic accountants, no trace of the stolen money had ever been found. The investigation had cost Nexus Banking over 50 million credits so far, with no end in sight. Meanwhile, on a small planet in the Outer Rim, a modest medical research facility began accepting its first patients. The treatment was completely free, no questions asked, no insurance required. The only requirement was medical need. And, somewhere in the galaxy, a former pirate captain named Vex Corvani was learning that being incredibly wealthy was much more complicated than being incredibly poor. But, it was a problem he was happy to have. The Drifting Dream, meanwhile, had been purchased by a scrap dealer for exactly $7 and was eventually recycled into materials for building new ships. Its contribution to galactic history was officially recorded as negligible. But, the people who knew the real story understood that sometimes the most valuable things in the universe could be hidden in the most worthless packages. And, sometimes justice came not from the law or from violence, but from the careful application of superior intelligence and an absolute refusal to give up. Marcus Chen had proven that a single human with the right knowledge and the proper motivation could take on one of the galaxy's most powerful corporations and win. His daughter's death had not been forgotten, and her memory would save thousands of other lives in the years to come. It was, everyone agreed, exactly the kind of story that made humanity dangerous. And exactly the kind of story that made them worth respecting.